Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast. I'm Natasya here with my friends
Selvia, Tevina, and Marshyanda.
and today we're going to sail into one of the greatest stories adventures ever told, Homer's The Odyssey.
So that's right. Forget about Marvel Cinematic Universe or anything about modern fantasy series for a moment because this is the original. Everything about it, the original blueprint of any blockbuster story. So in this epic, you've got everything from god and goddesses, love, betrayal, monster, storms, and then one very determined man who's just trying to get home and to his family. And I think that's what makes the Odyssey feel timeless because it feels human, but also at the same time, it is a hero story, especially for Greek history.
When you put it that way, it really makes you think like this is more than just a travel story. It's not like 80 days around the world or something simple. The story using theme of faith, survival, and identity, which we often see in Greek mythology.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating how it shows how far someone will go to return home and reclaim what truly matters to them. But what is really interesting here is how it balances faith versus free will or personal will. Because let's be honest, guys, Odysseus and his men probably could have been home in a few months if he had not made some crucial mistakes along the way.
That's such a good point about the mystic. So actually, that makes me think that we should start from the very beginning for our viewers. So guys, the Odyssey is the incredible epic poem by the Homers. So it tells a story about the Odysseus, king of Ithaca. Like he's been away for 20 years in total. 10 years for fighting in the Trojan War and another 10 years to trying to get home.
And what is fascinating about this story because the Odyssey is told in a 24 dactylic hexameter or a poem, but we will going to skip the poem lessons because of course it's going to take weeks. And well, what I think that's what amazing about Odysseus because he is not just a typical hero in general.
Very human is right. There are moments when he actually gets depressed after facing certain challenges, like after dealing with sirens, he feels overwhelmed by all the troubles he's facing when all he wants is just to go home. But that's what makes him so relatable. Instead of just relying on physical strength, he also fight with his mind with some help from several gods, especially Athena, who really support him.
Yeah, and it all begins right after the Trojan War ends, right? Like the Greeks have won, and Odysseus is finally sailing back home to Ithaca, where his beautiful and lovely wife Penelope and his son Telemachus have been waiting all these years. But early in his journey, he makes this one critical mistake that sets everything off, which is that he offends Poseidon, the god of the sea.
So, okay, hold on. Let's actually walk through this epic journey like step by step. So, after leaving the Troy, Odysseus and his crew first stop at the Thrace, so the place of the Caiconists who were allies with the Troy. And honestly, this is where things start going sideways.
Yeah, so I don't know why. After they raid the city, instead of trying to get away quickly, but they decide to have these huge celebrations. Of course, big mistakes, guys, because while they are partying, the Cyclonists group and attack at dawn, and Odysseus lose so many his troops and from the start, and it's such a rough beginning and to what should have been a happy journey home.
And then the mother's nature said, not today. A massive storm hit them and blows them completely. Of course, for 9 days straight, they end up in the land of the lotus eaters, which sound chill but is low-key dangerous. Some of his men eat the lotus flowers and just give up on life. They forgot about home and everything.
Here comes Odysseus has to literally drag his men back into the ships and tie them up. Because the struggle is real, but it gets even more and more wild because next they land on this island with a cave full of food, that turns out to be the home of Polyphemus, the Cyclops. And this guy is not friendly at all because he starts to eat Odysseus' men for dinner.
This is where Odysseus' big brain energy comes in, guys. So he gets the Cyclops drunk and tells him his name is Nobody. And then they blind him with a hot stick. And when the Cyclops screams like, "Nobody is hurting me!" like his friends just ignore him. And it's actually a genius brain thing.
But then he gets too cocky and he wants to flex about his name, and so he starts to shout, "My name is Odysseus, the king of Ithaca," and that is what is the main villain's origin story because Cyclops, like already mentioned before, is a Poseidon's son, and so Poseidon get really mad about it and basically make it his life mission to make Odysseus and his men journey back to Ithaca like a hell. So a drama.
So from there, it's just one chaotic adventure after another. They meet Aeolus, the god of wine, who gives them a bag of wine to get home. So they actually see Ithaca, but then his crew get curious and open the bag while Odysseus is sleeping and the wine escapes, blowing them all the way back. This disappointment must have been unreal.
And then there's Circe, the powerful witch who turns half his men into pigs. And with help from Hermes, Odysseus resists her magic and they actually become lovers for a whole year. But honestly, it's another distraction from his main goal of getting home.
So before they leave Circe, she gives them like the ultimate survival guide, how to get the pass by the sirens and also through the Scylla and also the monster called Charybdis. And the sirens sing this irresistible song that makes the sailors crash their ships. And so Odysseus has his crew plug their ears with the wax while he's tied to the mast to hear it safely. So that's some next level self-control.
And then comes this absolute worst choice, Scylla. Basically, this six-headed monster which will definitely eat six of his men versus Charybdis, the massive whirlpool that could destroy the entire ship. So Odysseus has to make the heartbreaking decision to sacrifice six men to save the rest because he chose to close towards Scylla rather than losing all of them together, and that is some heavy leadership skills that he used to survive and go back to Ithaca.
So the final straw is when they land on Thrinakia, the island of the son of god Helios. These men are starving and despite multiple warnings, they slaughter Helios' sacred cattle while Odysseus is asleep. Zeus gets so mad that he destroys their ship with a lightning bolt and everyone dies except Odysseus.
And then Odysseus washes up alone on Calypso's island where he's basically held captive as her lover for 7 years. Like imagine 7 years. But then finally Athena convinces Zeus to intervene and they make Calypso let him go. And then he builds a raft and sets out again only to get shipwrecked again and wash up on the island of the Phaeacians.
So this is where we get the famous storytelling scene. So Odysseus tell his entire journey to the Phaeacians, and they are so moved, and they give him like a ship and also the treasure to finally return to Ithaca. And after 20 years, he finally makes it home. But no worries, guys. The plot doesn't stop right here.
Yeah, that's right. Because when he gets back to Ithaca, another divine help from Athena gave him to disguise him as an old beggar so he can scout up to the situation. But the situation is really rough because when he's back to Ithaca, his palace is filled with men who is her wife's suitors with this entitled trying to marry his wife Penelope.
Meanwhile, Penelope has been holding it down with a genius move. She tells the suitors she will choose a husband after she finished weaving a bridal suit. But every night she secretly unravels her work. She's been doing this for years.
And then the climax is actually so satisfying because Penelope announces she will marry who can string Odysseus' massive bow and shoot an arrow through 12 except. But yeah, none of the suitors can even string the bow. And then there's the old leader, which is Odysseus in disguise, asked to try, and of course he turns it perfectly, easily, and shoots the arrow.
So and then he turns to the suitors and say like, okay, there is a new target, and just starts taking them all out. And with help from his son Telemachus and also the few royal servants, they defeat all of the suitors, and that's the ultimate comeback story, I think.
Yeah, but I think the best part of this story is the reunion moment with Penelope. And she's actually really smart. She just doesn't believe it's him, so she tried to test him by telling the servant to move their marriage bed. But only Odysseus would know that the bed that he built is from a living tree, so it's very heavy. It cannot be moved easily. So when he gets upset about moving it, she knows that it's really him, and it gets so emotional that they are finally getting back together after a whole 2 decades.
So, finally, after 20 years of struggles, Odysseus is finally home with his family and his kingdom is restored. It's about preference, using intelligence over brute force and never giving up on matters most.
And that is the tea on the Odyssey, guys.
Now that we've walked through his entire journey, so let's step back and think. Like, what do you guys think about why these stories matter so much in a Greek civilization?
Right, because the influence that this guy had in our literary world is until today is something remarkable, I would say. Because, fun fact, even until today, some modern works still use him, the Odyssey, as inspiration. Because, fun fact, there is a Korean boy group called M.Hum, which debuted in 2020. And at 2021, they tried to release an album called Dimension Dilemma, which basically the main theme from the album is talking about the Odyssey. So they also use 3 concepts there. So there's an album called Odysseus, and then Scylla, and then Charybdis. And if you are trying to look at the lyrics, mostly the songs from this album is talking about courage, something about wanting to do something that they want to achieve at one day. They want to be a movie star, they want to be a famous artist, something like that. Something that is very remarkable because they are young and they want to be something, and they are trying really hard to achieve it. Basically the same like the Odyssey, which is trying to get home back to his family in Ithaca after a long years after the war.
That's true.
That
right.
exactly. If we think in the context of Western cultural civilizations, how much work kind of shape how the Western world defines what is meant to be a hero. Odysseus became the prototype of the clever, adaptable man who faces adversity through his intelligence, not just his strength.
Yeah, because for the Greeks, it is because for them back then, the Odyssey was not just a short bedtime story because it was an education. And the Greek used Homer epic to teach young people about life, such what it means to be brave, and then how to think wisely, and also to respect God and to face destiny with courage.
So it's crazy to think like how one Asian story can echo through so many generations like us. We know the story of the Odyssey right now, right? So back then, the Iliad and also the Odyssey were the basis of an education and the whole culture. Like the Greeks studied them to learn about the moral values and also leadership skills.
And the heroes, the Achilles in the Iliad and then the Odysseus in the Odyssey became the role models because they weren't perfect. They show human strength, cleverness, and the will to survive even when fate seems like it is impossible for them to survive this whole drama like in the Odyssey.
Maybe that is the what made Homer's storytelling so impactful, even after thousands of years. Because beyond the story of battles, adventures, and the monsters, it tells about something timeless. It shows their strength, their mistake, and their fight against fate.
Yeah, I actually agree with Selvia. And listening to this, I have actually something fun to think about. Like, what if Odysseus never get help from the gods? Like, imagine if Athena actually never stepped in, or what if Poseidon just ignored him completely? Like, how do you think this will change the story?
That's a really good question actually. Like I think without the gods, Odysseus wouldn't even survive half the trip. And but maybe that's kind of the whole idea. Back then, when the Greeks really believed humans couldn't escape the fate, the gods were the symbol of that. So no matter how brave you are, like destiny always has a say.
Yeah, true. Because in my opinion, I think if he didn't get any divine help, the story might actually feel more humanistic and also realistic. Because I don't think he will survive after all that problem in sea. And I think it should be about the raw survival. And Odysseus relying on his own willpower, his strength, and his mind. I think it will be make it much more tragic and also more realistic.
I think that is the definition of what cool Greek culture is. They saw humans and God as connected like two sides of the same coin, and heroes were kind of the bridge between those worlds. So, if they remove the God completely, the Odyssey might lose its core theme, this consistent tension between fate and free will.
Yeah, that is actually makes sense, guys. But anyway, talking about Homer, have you guys ever thought about whether Homer is real or like Homer actually just one guy or it's just a name of people used for a bunch of storyteller?
That's such a big topic, actually. Like some say he was a blind poet who lived around like 8 or 9 before century, but others think that Homer might have just been a little formed from a group of poets who told this story over generations.
Yeah, that is super interesting. For me personally, if it's not from one person, it means that the Odyssey could be like a collective, personal creation, something that they use to tell a story about a heroic strategic or something like that, and something that grew out of the culture itself, shaped and retold by so many voices. Yeah.
Another that is what honestly that is what make this story is timeless. So whether the humor was real or not, it doesn't even matter. What matters is that the story built the foundation of Western storytelling, the heroes, the emotion, or even the moral struggles. It all started right here. I couldn't have said it better, but it's kind of wild how one story from 1,000 years ago still defines how we tell stories today.
Yeah. And anyway, going back to what you guys said and what you guys mentioned earlier about how much this story influences the Greek so much, like I started to think besides Odyssey becoming one of the most symbolic figure and story in the literary history, what is the other aspects that you guys think like that makes Odyssey is crucial for literature?
So I think when I try to read this story, the Odyssey, there's a lot of interpretation because it is basically from a poem, a collection of poems. So I think some of the interpretation started with flashbacks and then the heroic themes and even the structure. This become a model for some another epic works and making it foundation for Western literature. I think that's what makes it Odysseus or Odyssey crucial for literature.
Yes, I heard that several literary modern works are also influenced by the Odyssey, like The Lord of the Rings and even Percy Jackson. So the more we think about it, this literature has worked similarly. It's always about courage, wisdom, heroism, or also loyalty.
Yes, and not only from modern work. I heard that Homer, the Odyssey, also influenced some of old stories like the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and I couldn't get more agree with that.
That the words that we mentioned before, always with courage, wisdom, heroism, and also adventures. No wonder, no matter from what kind of era a literary work comes from, they always have at least one literary work that is influenced by Homer's Odyssey.
Yeah, that is some big influence right there. So it's amazing to see how can a story that is written like 1,000 years ago, even with the writers who became a part of the conspiracy theories, become one of the most influencing literary works even until now.
Exactly. It still blows my mind every time this story continue to influence our generation, especially of writers and after, whether it's the ancient poets like Virgil or even the modern one like Rick Riordan. I think I started to get interested with Greek mythology is also because from Rick Riordan because I read his book from Percy Jackson series, and I think these lessons that Homer gave about faith and the theme about courage and wisdom never fade away, and they just take it into a new form in each era, basically like movie or another like songs. Yeah.
And that is what I call as the power of literature. So every hero's journey that we read or watch today owes something to Odyssey's path. It brings the past, present, or even the future to remind us that human struggles, emotion, dreams, and others are always gonna be there.
Yes, and just like how Odysseus and his own adventure, we all face our own adventure. But just keep going because that is what makes our life even more beautiful as we should enjoy it step by step. And I think we had enough conversation about Odysseus and the interesting theory we have already talked about. I think it is time for us to say goodbye then. Thank you for listening to this podcast and we will see you next time.
Bye!